everybody, let's just give her a chance. And ultimately, so far defensively, she's been working out. But that was in preseason. But as of recent, I got to be honest, Raven Johnson has been a non-factor in these games. The Fever are still losing games. Their defense is still horrible. So I have to agree that maybe that might not have been the best draft pick. I just got to be honest. Preseason looked good, but as of right now, since the game got for real, she ain't been looking so hot. I just got to be honest with you guys. Now, with that being said, something else we're going to talk about in this video here is the Fever attendance drastically dropping.
She finally said it. The accumulated weight of a broken system, a coaching staff operating without her trust, and an organization that has consistently demonstrated it does not fully understand what it possesses finally produced the moment the front office had been hoping to avoid. Caitlin Clark did not hint at the struggle. She did not speak in careful diplomatic language designed to protect organizational relationships while quietly communicating her frustration to the people paying attention. She laid out a reality on a public platform that landed like a formal declaration that the current situation in Indianapolis is not sustainable and she is not going to pretend otherwise. For Stephanie White, this was not another media cycle to manage with coaching language about collective effort and defensive identity. This was her franchise player publicly communicating a level of mental and competitive exhaustion that the coaching staff's adjustments cannot address because the coaching staff's decisions are part of what is causing it. Welcome back to Hoopzonic, where we cover the full picture of what is happening in Indianapolis without organizational protection. The locker room silence after these comments went viral told its own story, and the fallout from what Clark said is still developing in ways this front office is not equipped to handle.
Honest with you guys. Now, with that being said, something else we're going to talk about in this video here is the Fever attendance drastically dropping. Now, we know fans have made it their business to put on quote-unquote fire Stephanie White boycott, and a lot of people are speaking with their pocketbooks and credit cards instead of going online making tweets, because we know if you want an organization to hear you, you got to hit them in the pockets, you got to hit them where it hurt, and that's exactly what the Indiana Fever fans has been doing to this organization. Now, we're not going to play all of this interview. You guys,
the moment arrived during a sit-down on the Post Moves podcast alongside teammate Aaliyah Boston. The world expected the kind of conversation that athlete-hosted podcasts typically produce. Highlight discussions, competitive reflection, optimistic framing about the season ahead. What Clark delivered was something entirely different in tone and in implication. She was not talking about basketball strategy or competitive adjustments or the adjustments a young team makes as the season develops. She was talking about survival inside an environment that is actively working against her rather than in service of her. The tone was detached in a specific and identifiable way. The way a player sounds when they have stopped trying to convince themselves that the situation is better than it is and started speaking about it from a place of clear-eyed and somewhat exhausted honesty. Stephanie White was reportedly blindsided by the candor because a franchise player publicly admitting to mental exhaustion that the organization is contributing to is not a problem that an adjusted rotation or a modified defensive scheme resolves. It is an organizational culture problem, and it requires an organizational culture response. Hoopzonic has been documenting the conditions that produced this moment all season, and none of what Clark said was a surprise to anyone watching, honestly.
Facts, and let's listen.
I try to distance myself from, everything online the best I can. Obviously I'm in the know about a lot of stuff, but when I get into the heat of the season, I'm very locked in on what we need to do and what our team's about and, our locker room and whatever that is. I feel I do probably a lot of meditation, a lot of breathing work. I journal a lot. I have sports psychologists that I work with, doing everything I can to make sure my mind's in the right place, because you have all the physical skills. That's why you're in the league. That's why you are one of 160 players or whatever it is now. This is a really hard league.
The tension between the locker room and the coaching staff has been building toward this specific kind of public expression for weeks, and Clark's podcast comments accelerated a timeline that was already moving in an uncomfortable direction. When a player of Clark's competitive profile and public platform begins speaking openly about distancing herself from the online noise and focusing exclusively on protecting her own mental health, the message to the coaching staff is not subtle. It is a player communicating that the internal environment has become something she needs to manage around rather than something that supports and energizes her. White is reportedly furious about the public nature of these comments because they illuminate the organizational atmosphere in ways that press conference language about mindset and discipline and collective effort has been carefully designed to obscure. This situation stopped being about basketball tactics some time ago. It is about a player who arrived in Indianapolis as the most commercially and competitively significant person this league has ever produced and has been asked to carry the weight of an entire sport's growth while the organization around her fumbles the most basic responsibilities of franchise management at the highest level. That combination produces exactly the kind of public honesty that Clark delivered, and the front office has nobody to blame for it except the decisions they have been making since training camp opened.
Are one of 160 players or whatever it is now. Like, this is a really hard league to play in. It's, you know, just making sure your mind is right, and sometimes that's the harder part of it. Like, I always tell people this, like, I feel like shooting like is way more mental, and like, first of all, being in good shape. Like, you can't be exhausted or like your shooting fundamentals are going to go to crap, and just like your belief that you can make the shot. So I try to work on my mind as much as I can, and I feel like a lot of people don't probably understand like how taxing a lot of the pressure and the spotlight can be at sometimes, but I would never change that for anything. Like, I love it, and I'm very blessed, and I'm very thankful that it has brought me a lot of really amazing.
The Raven Johnson situation sits directly inside this conversation and deserves its own honest examination because the gap between the preseason narrative around that selection and the current competitive reality is significant and visible. The organizational framing around Johnson emphasized the defensive spark she would provide, the pressure she would generate on opposing ball handlers, and the way her competitive intensity would change the energy of the roster around her. The reality of the regular season has been considerably more complicated. Johnson has not established herself as the impactful presence the draft picks suggested the coaching staff believed they were acquiring. The camaraderie that Clark projected in the podcast conversation felt more like the professional courtesy that competitive teammates extend to each other in public settings than the genuine on-court connection that changes how a roster functions. Fans who have been watching every possession have reached conclusions about the roster construction that are reflected in the attendance numbers and the comment sections and the social media engagement data that the organization monitors internally, regardless of what it acknowledges externally. The blame for those conclusions is landing on Stephanie White and the front office with increasing volume and increasing specificity.
News, because I feel like this needs to be talked about. He stated, "We are witnessing the biggest FAFO bag fumble of all time by the Fever." Whoa. Yes, he did. Now, what is this post right here detailing? It stated, yearly league attendance by team. 2026. So this is all based off as of right now. Now, we know that the Golden State Valkyries and the Fever and the Liberty are the hottest teams in the entire league. How the hell?
The podcast also touched on the history between Clark and Johnson, specifically the dynamic that originated from the 2023 Final Four and the viral moments that established the public narrative around their relationship before either of them had played a professional minute. Clark worked to frame the current situation as one where the past has been set aside and the shared goal of winning is the only thing operating between them, but the on-court evidence tells a more complicated story than the interview framing suggests. Chemistry between teammates is not established through public statements about moving past old history. It is established through the game tape, through the shared reads that develop when two players spend enough time in the same system to anticipate each other's decisions. That chemistry is not consistently visible in what the Fever are producing on the floor. White is struggling to integrate these personalities into a functional competitive unit, and Clark's carefully worded references to the taxing nature of the current environment suggest she feels that struggle from the inside at least as clearly as everyone watching from the outside.
Know that the Golden State Valkyries and the Fever and the Liberty are the hottest teams in the entire league. How the hell do the Indiana Fever attendance drops all the way down to 15,000? You mean to tell me that the Golden State Valkyries has a $3,000 gap? I mean, 3,000 seat gap over the Fever. Atlanta Dream even has a 17,000 gap. mind you, they're playing in an NBA arena. They're playing where the Pacers play. So they are.
The critical consensus forming around the Raven Johnson pick has moved from skeptical to openly damaging for White's organizational credibility, and the trajectory of that conversation is not reversing itself through performance on the floor. The Fever are still losing games they should be winning. The defense that the entire coaching philosophy was supposedly designed around remains inconsistent at best, and structurally broken at worst. The energy inside the building has shifted in a direction that goes beyond a team going through a difficult competitive stretch into something closer to an audience that has lost faith in the organizational direction. Johnson being a non-factor in games where the team is fighting for its competitive life is not a development story that patience alone can sustain. It is a roster construction result that the coaching staff is accountable for and that the front office is accountable for authorizing. If the coaching staff cannot develop the talent it was given the organizational authority to select, then the question of why that coaching staff retains that authority becomes the question that everyone inside that building is privately asking while nobody is publicly answering it.
Stephanie White. This let us know they ain't rocking with Stephanie White. She's not the coach they want in there. And I'm going to keep saying this over and over and over again. Caitlin Clark need a Phil Jackson. Until the Indiana Fever give her a Phil Jackson, it is about to be hell to pay for any coach that want to come in Indy and try to run their offense and definitely do not know what the hell they doing with Caitlin Clark. If you don't even know what you're doing with Caitlin Clark, you need not come to Indy.
The numbers have stopped whispering and started screaming, and any organizational representative who looks at this attendance data and reaches for an explanation that does not include the word accountability is not operating in good faith. Indiana Fever attendance has dropped to approximately 15,000 per home game. 15,000 for a team with the most commercially significant and most widely recognized player in the history of women's professional basketball on its active roster. The Golden State Valkyries, and a franchise that is still in the process of establishing its basic operational identity, was generating competitive attendance numbers. The Atlanta Dream, despite their own performance challenges, is seeing attendance that compares favorably to what Indianapolis is producing. This is not a natural competitive slump producing temporary fan disengagement that resolves when the wins start coming. This is a coordinated and conscious withdrawal of financial support from a fan base that has identified specific organizational decisions as the source of their frustration and is communicating their assessment through the only language that every sports franchise understands without translation. The fans are not coming back until something changes, not something cosmetic, not a new promotional campaign or a revised media strategy, something real, something that demonstrates the organization understands what it has in Caitlin Clark and is prepared to build everything around protecting and maximizing it rather than managing and containing it. Hoopsonic will be tracking every game, every press conference, and every attendance report as this situation continues developing. Drop your honest take below. Has this organization crossed the point of no return, or is there still a window to save this season before the contract conversation becomes the only story left to tell?